Hello out there in Channel 9 land. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 5, the Double 5 episode of Talkin Baseball. Today's episode is called Left Fielders. I'm Jason Smith, as always the co-host, Pete Lincoln, and we're coming to you for a sweltering thunderstorm day in mid-July here. We're already sweating 30 seconds into the show, so bear with us. It's 90 and we drove through a monsoon to get here today. So thank you. Hope you appreciate the efforts we put forth to get here today.
We're dedicating this show to Jim Bouton, who recently passed. For you younger folks, Jim Bouton wrote probably the most memorable book about baseball and baseball history, a book called Ball 4. A quick review of Jim. He came up as a rookie phenom in 1963 with the Yankees. He had two terrific years. Had a great World Series, but hurt his arm in the late season of 65, I think. Went back to the minors, and then perfected the knuckleball. And he tried to make a comeback with a team called the Seattle Pilots, which probably few people have heard as a one-year wonder in Seattle.
Yes.
And during that year, he kept a journal of insider goings-on between the players and the coaches. When the book was published, the book called Ball 4, it was unanimously approved by the fandom and condemned by Major League Baseball. In fact, he was almost barred from the sport for a while.
We have to understand that this was 1969, and by the way, the Pilots became the Twins the next year, if you're curious about that. They moved to Minnesota. And there was no social media back in 1969. In fact, there was very little media at all outside of sports writers. So we're so used to players tweeting and sharing facts, and this player had a kid and this player said this. That didn't exist 50 years ago. It was pretty much what the sports writers said went, and it was an unwritten rule. The sports writers traveled with the team, and they did not write about personal stuff. Anything about children, families, goings-on, dalliances outside of the marriage, drug problems, drinking problems, that was not brought up by the media.
And the book was written a few years before free agency set in.
Mm-hmm.
So the salaries of ball players were nowhere near the amounts they are now. So a lot of them were playing and for almost a working man's wage, and they would work during the wintertime as well.
Yeah.
So their carryings on, as someone said, they were 15-year-old boys living in 25-year-old men's bodies.
Yeah, there's a pretty rough and tumble crew.
And so, without spending a lot of time on this, here's one of the anecdotes that he tells. Playing with the Yankees, you got to spend a lot of time with Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle, who was arguably one of the greatest players that ever played. However, he was quite a playboy as well, and spent a lot of time in taverns with his Rat Pack buddies, Billy Martin and Yogi Berra and Whitey Ford. Well, one night he got out cruising several places, and the next day he was so hungover he asked the manager, "Please, could I have the day off?" So the manager said, "Okay, we'll give you the day off." But the game turned out to be an extra inning game, and they needed a player to come in. So Mickey staggers up to the plate, hits the ball 530 feet to win the game, and he comes back to the dugout and says, "You guys don't know how hard that was. I saw 3 balls coming at me, so I just swung at the middle one."
But at the time,
and that's the kind of thing which fans found hysterical,
right,
but the Major League Baseball did not.
The players did not. In fact, Bowie Kuhn, who was the commissioner at the time, tried to go after Bouton and get him to retract all of these stories that he told, because it wasn't in the best interest of baseball to be sharing personal stuff like this. And Bouton told him rather colorfully what he could do with that retraction. But this was really groundbreaking, because I think in any sport, it was the first book that really showed what life was like off of the field. Yeah, we all know on the field. Off the field was a totally different story.
Yeah, they now call them tell-all stories.
Tell-all stories. Well, you figure the players are on the field 2 to 3 hours a day. Well, that leaves 22 to 21 hours a day when they're not on the field. So that's 90% of the time. So but what happens?
The thing about this book is that it's timeless. I pick it up and read it every 2 or 3 years. And if people have not read it out there, pick it up and read it. And it doesn't matter that it was written 50 years ago. Just the nature of the travel and the stress and the kind of lives these folks have to live out there is fascinating and very, very funny.
It's very funny. It's actually, we talked about Bull Durham on this show before. It's actually very similar to that. All the bus rides and guys hassling each other and drinking and just being general goofballs. And Jim Bouton was actually a really interesting guy. Actually, he retired and then came back in the late 70s and pitched a couple of games and didn't do very well. But he was out of the majors for 5 or 6 years at that point and came back to have a minor comeback, but he was also an actor. He was in the
Right.
movie called The Long Goodbye that was directed by Robert Altman. He's actually a bad guy, and he's very good. And a lot of people don't know he actually invented Big League Chew. He was not a fan of the chewing tobacco, so he tried to find a way to appeal to the kids to look like the ball players without using the tobacco, and hence Big League Chew in the pack, and it's shredded, and it looks like tobacco, except it's grape, strawberry, what have you.
And it was a huge hit.
It still is, actually.
Made more money off that than baseball, I think.
And they think the guys chew that more than tobacco nowadays. So Mr. Belton, this episode is dedicated to you. Thank you for all that you did. For writing probably the best baseball book ever and all your other endeavors.
It is very literate, unlike so many baseball books, which leads me to the next one. Now, I know a lot of baseball fans also like to read baseball books, as, if you recall, Rich Letarte did the first show we did here, talking about a book about baseball he wrote himself. So Rich, I think, might be interested in this. Jerry Remy, the erstwhile ball player and former Red Sox announcer, wrote a book that just came out Tuesday called If These Walls Could Talk. I couldn't wait to read this book. I love Jerry Remy. I loved him as a player. I love him as an announcer. And this book, my wife said it, I got it the day it came out. Sat down and read it, and I couldn't have been more disappointed. The book is not If the Walls Could Talk. The walls apparently were sealed, so they didn't say anything. The book is the most PC book you can imagine. Everything was good, and he co-wrote it with the late Nick Cafardo. Nick Cafardo was no Dan Shaughnessy or Gordon Needs when it came to writing. It's a very simplistic style.
We're not here to speak ill of the dead. Mr. Cafardo was sad that he passed away, and by all accounts, he was well-liked and a great guy. But as we talked about in the years past on this show, his writing is a little to be desired.
There's a foreword by Sean McDonough, who was Remy's partner for quite a while, and afterward by Don Orsillo, who we worked with. And those two are worth the read themselves, because they talk about all the monkey shines that they put up with.
Inane banter warnings and things like that.
The one time they had a lengthy discussion on eclipses, and Orsillo said it must be the sun comes between the moon and the earth. And it took about 2 innings to figure the thing.
Jerry said, I don't think that's the case. We wouldn't be here anymore. And they talk about the famous pizza incident that happened during one of the games. They talk about
boob grab.
There's a grab in an intimate place that they caught on camera between two fans that still exists on YouTube. And by the way, I highly recommend that Sean McDonough has done some games on WEEI. It is worth the listen. He is a fantastic announcer. I wish he would take Dave O'Brien's place, because we all know O'Brien's a trip. We've said that here before. McDonough is hilarious, and he keeps the game entertaining. And we really miss the days of Jerry and Sean and Jerry and Don, because they were absolutely hilarious. I remember the time that Jerry and Sean were in Detroit, and there was an Eminem concert across the street, and one of their assistants somehow managed to get Eminem do-rags, and they wore the do-rags for the entire game. And Sean started calling him the Reminem, which was rather hilarious.
But none of that is in the book.
None of it.
None of it. And so without belaboring this, I asked Jason to read one passage. There's a whole filler middle section of the book about the 2004, 7, 13, and 18 Sox, which looks like it was written by Wikipedia. Just the facts of what goes on with no Remy involved at all. And then there are 8 players that he talked about that he called great players. And again, there's no connection with him almost whatsoever. And listen to the style of this passage, talking about Carlton Fisk.
He wasn't afraid to go out to the mound to chew out a pitcher. It would take him a while to get out there, but once he finally did, he could let him have it pretty good. His throws to second base were like arrows. They were just straight. There was no tail on them. There was no nothing. He threw it directly over the top. He was a pretty special guy to play with, and he was a good friend. We maintain a good relationship to this day. Every time that he stops in a luxury box up in Fenway, he says, hi. Now, does that come across like a well-read, well-versed author to you? It's sort of like see Dick run, see Jane run, see Spot run. You said we're not here to speak ill of the dead, but yeah, the writing style is not exactly Shakespearean.
So the bottom line is, if you want to read a book about Jerry Remy, go ahead, but it's not recommended. No stars.
In fact, I think his previous book about baseball was much better than this one. It was much more insightful. It was much more in depth about the play of the game, and it told a lot more of his personality than this one ever does.
So we'll put that aside. The All-Star game just finished. We have mixed feelings about that as well.
Well, it was minimal Red Sox participation this year, if you noticed.
That's right. Only 3 Red Sox players. J.D. flied out and struck out. Bogarts hit into a double play, and Mookie was the only player that didn't get in the bat in the game. Yeah. So our participation was minimal. And the American League won 4-3. And the American League pitchers struck out 16 National League players. Which
is the trend of the day. We've talked before about this is the 3 true outcome era of baseball. A walk, a homer, or a strikeout, and usually a strikeout. And
there's far more interest in the home run contest the day before.
Oh, the home run contest was all hype. For days they were leading up to it, and who was going to be in the contest, and what brackets they had, and who was against each other, and who was going to win. And it's this huge hype deal, and it's entertaining. It is, I'll admit it.
Vlad Guerrero Jr., who has gotten 8 home runs total in his short major league career, was entered into the contest, even though he's not in the All-Star game. And he hit 783 home runs during some insane number of home runs, but he didn't win the contest because he blew himself out
getting to the finals.
Pete Alonso won the contest, and the $1 million that went along with it, which doubled his salary for the year.
Alonso and Guerrero were both rookies, and they were the 2 finalists, so it goes to show how much skill goes into
the prize for winning it was $1 million, and they make $560 million, $100,000 as a rookie player.
So but you're right, that is almost taking the place of the All-Star game itself. And I think the All-Star game has sort of, it's an exhibition. Don't get me, and I think it should be that way. I hated when it counted for the home field advantage. That was silly. I like that it's an exhibition and it doesn't mean a heck of a lot, but how many guys dropped out and couldn't go and tweaked a hammy and this guy replaying? Even right up until the day before the All-Star game, they were still shuffling the rosters.
And I think the silliest thing about it this year was they mic'd up half the players. Freddie Freeman is batting and talking to the announcers, and he struck out because he was distracted by questions they were asking about Verlander, who's sitting on the round smiling as he's blowing one by him.
And Verlander's a Hall of Fame pitcher. He's got to face that guy as he's mic'd up. Joe Buck is yammering in his ear for 5 minutes.
And in the 3rd inning, we never got to see JD's at bat because they were talking to the managers in the dugout.
Yeah, so right. Yeah,
it's clear proof the game doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
The interesting thing to us about it was the MVP of the game was a Cleveland pitcher who pitched the 5th inning of the game and struck out the side.
Shane Bieber, not Justin. Shane Bieber.
And he became the MVP. But the closer of the game, Chapman from New York, struck out the side in the 9th as a closer, which is far more valuable than somebody strikes out the side in the 5th inning.
Yeah, so
but I think they make those awards probably about the 7th inning, and they didn't get a chance to change it.
And it was in Cleveland, so that may have been a hometown thing that Bieber got the MVP. But you're right. I think they choose it probably an inning or 2 ahead of time.
Because they have to give the truck away.
Yeah, the truck and the little trophy thing and the announcement. So, the All-Star Game MVP was a little dubious this year, to say the least.
So we are pretty lukewarm on that, too. Yeah. But that does leave us into the trivia question. Now, fans of this show, remember that we changed the format last week. What we had been doing before is give a trivia question and let it sit until the end of the show where we reveal the answer. But since I am sitting next to the Encyclopedia of Baseball and Trivia, I thought it might be an interesting thing not to tell him what the question was going to be ahead of time, and if he does know it, to keep it under his hat until we do give the answer.
The pressure's on.
And if he doesn't know it, I'll give him hints until he finally does.
The progressive clues.
He got it in 2 hints last time, so here's the question.
Okay.
Roger Clemens won the All-Star Game MVP in 1986. Pedro Martinez won it in 1999. Who was the last Red Sox to be the All-Star Game MVP?
I think I know it, but I'm going to wait till
Okay,
the end of
you
the
hold
show.
on it, all right?
I know someone who was an MVP. I don't know if it's the most recent, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, so you people at home, please don't Google it.
Yeah, please don't Google. Play along. Try to
I mean,
figure
I know
it out.
people just can't stand to be 5 seconds without information in their hand, but at least give it a shot before you do.
Mull it over, as we always say.
All right, this brings us to the part of the show that we've been carrying on now for 5 weeks. And why don't you just give them a quick rundown of what we're doing
So
here.
we decided to do a Mount Rushmore of players at every position. We went and took the 5 best players at every position since 1950 because, as we said, that was the time when integration had fully happened, there was travel to the West Coast, and my illustrious co-host was alive to see all these players too. So we came up with the best 5 players since 1950 at every position, and it could only be 5. That we couldn't have 6, and if someone took the place, you had to remove someone. So that was the challenge.
And a few caveats about that. They had to play primarily in that position. So someone like Pete Rose isn't eligible for anything because he played 400 games about 5 different positions. We don't care about PEDs either.
No, never. Which is pertinent to this one, actually.
And also, anybody currently playing has to have played at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've only had 2 of those so
yes,
far.
well, 2 current players. So,
Albert Pujols was one of them.
yes, which which our director, producer, jack of all trades over here was very appreciative.
She's smiling ear to ear.
There it is. There's the cat.
There we go.
There is the cat. Oh, so I think Pujols and Cano, I think, were our only active players that we've had so far. So this begins the left fielders.
Well,
And
first of all, you know, one of the things about
that's right.
showing on cable TV and then on YouTube is we really don't have much of a handle on who our audience is, how many people are watching us.
Thank you if
And
you are.
And especially if it goes out to YouTube, it could be anywhere in the world. Well, we hear once in a while people will say, oh, we watch your show on TV all the time. And so I'd like to do a shout out for 2
Yes.
particular people. One is to Stephanie Burton of Ayer, who is a big Red Sox fan and tells us all the time that she loves our show. And the other is Elsa Watson, who is a member of the crew up at the Eagle House. Every time she sees me, I see you and your son on TV all the time. I said, so thank you for watching us.
In fact, I was stopped a couple weeks ago at Bad Larry's by someone I'd never met before. I see you on Channel 9. I'm not much of a baseball fan, but I love watching you two. Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
We'll fill in with a few jokes and songs later on.
So we don't have, we don't have much of a scope past this, but we do our best. Thank you, everyone, for watching, wherever you may be, Massachusetts, the West Coast, anywhere in the
And
world.
actually, let us know, and we'll give you a
Yes.
shout out on the show.
Yes.
Glad to do that.
Figure out a way, comment on YouTube or whatever. Well, we're not too proud to publicize ourselves.
So left fielders have enormous number of excellent players over the years. Excellent over the years.
This was the most extensive, I think, by far of any position.
4
we've
of
done.
our players are in the Hall of Fame, and 1 should be more than those 4.
Yes.
The WAR, the WAR leader for all of baseball all time is Babe Ruth. Number 2 is our number 1 candidate for left field is Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds, yes.
Barry Bonds had a phenomenal career.
And if you look at his numbers, they're almost comical, like how
right.
how much better they are than everyone else that was in baseball at the time. They look like the old the Stratomatic baseball stats when you would just have the best guys playing. His numbers are just absurd compared to
First of all,
everyone else.
he played the most games in left field of anyone.
Yes, he did.
27-15, had 29-35 hits only because he walked so many times. 762 homers, that's the all-time leader.
All-time record.
1996 RBIs, that's number 3, a lifetime average of 298. Steals, 514 steals. He won 8 Gold Gloves.
I mean, this is
Top that.
the ultimate 5-tool player right there. Just did everything on the planet, and his walk total was scary. He led the league in walks 12 times. He had over 2,500 career walks, and 680 of them were intentional walks. And imagine that. He walked 100. He had 120 intentional walks in one year. Can you imagine that? Oh, Bonds is a forget it. Just put him on, and he would get walked with nobody on base. Yeah. They would just walk him and say, "Heck with it." Just work.
He had 232 walks total in 2004, which broke the record by 50.
It was just, his numbers are just ridiculous. 12 Silver Slugger awards. He won 7 MVPs and 4 were in a row. 4 consecutive MVPs. And and in 2004, the season he broke the walk record, he had a .609 on-base percentage. Now imagine that. He's on base 60% of his at-bats.
He had 500 homers and 500 steals, and no one else has 400 and 400.
Right. And, interestingly, in contrast to today's players, he never led the league in strikeouts, ever.
That's right.
Probably because he walked so much. But I think some people on the East Coast don't appreciate just how good he was, because he played mostly in San Francisco, 10 o'clock games. You'd wake up in the morning and find out the highlights of what he did. A lot of people on the West Coast never got to watch him live, and that's too bad, because I think, at least in my lifetime, I think he's the most dominant player since I was born in 1975.
He is the son of Bobby Bonds, and they're the only 2 father-sons that had 30 home runs in their season. Only 2.
And we said we don't, and always the cloud around him, we said we do not care about the PEDs. Never tested positive, I might add, so that's what we have to go on. And you may disagree with us because people have very strong feelings about that, but we've said we don't care about that. Yeah. So he is number 1 by a long shot, and maybe the best at any position we're going to do on this show.
The big negative, of course, was his personality. Yep. He played for Arizona State and was the best player on the team. He was suspended for 2 games for missing curfew, and the team voted not to let him back on the team. Yeah. Of course, the coach overrode that. Yeah. But that would tell you something. Yeah. He was terrible with the press. Yes. He wasn't a likable guy. That shouldn't matter. And for what we're talking about, it doesn't matter at all.
Doesn't matter to us at all. Although I do have to say, there was one time, goes to show some of the personalities on this Giants team. We've mentioned him briefly before. The Giants also had a second baseman called Jeff Kent, who was actually an even bigger jerk than Barry Bonds was. And the 2 of them had a fight, and the team backed Bonds in the fight. So it goes to show just how disliked Jeff Kent was. I mean, Bonds he wasn't exactly a likable guy, but he was more likable than Jeff Kent. And actually, I remember when the Red Sox first hired Heidi Watney back in the day, she had worked for the Giants, and she actually said that she never had any issues with him, that he was always very cordial with her. So it could have been a per-case basis that maybe the biggest writers didn't get along with.
And there's got to be some jealousy involved.
Oh, of course, absolutely. So, but that's our number 1 pick.
Now, number 2 pick is my favorite player of all time. Yes. That I saw myself. Yes. I love this guy, Ricky Henderson. Yes.
Who may be actually the number 2 player of any position we do. He just happens to also play left field.
Talk about a guy with multiple skills.
Okay.
He played 24. He played forever.
Yes.
He played with, I think, 10 teams.
Oh, at least.
He played with the Red Sox
24 seasons he played total.
It's over 3,000 hits. But the thing about Ricky Henderson that will never, ever possibly be broken, especially these days, is he broke the stolen base record by 500. He had 1,406 steals. Imagine that.
The next guy down had 900.
He had 130 in one season. Ty Cobb held the record forever with 92.
And he broke it by 38 steals. And he was such a distraction, and this is why we think that he's the greatest leadoff hitter ever. Now, he also had he had almost 2,200 walks in his career, too. Now, imagine that. Now, the last thing you want to do is walk Ricky Henderson to lead off an inning, right? So he still was able to work 2,200 walks despite them not wanting to walk him because he would just automatically steal second and sometimes third. And he was such a distraction on the bases, too. He would play chess games with the pitcher, and he would just sort of dart back and forth. And he said to this day he never looked at what the pitcher was doing up here. He'd look at the pitcher's feet, and that's how he could tell whether he could steal or not.
Bill James said, split him in half, you'd still have 2 major leaguers.
That's absolutely true. But
he held the record for the most, I think he still has the record for the most leadoff homers as well.
Right, he wasn't just a one-trick pony. He had 297 homers in his career, which is, for a speedy guy, that's a lot more homers than you would think you would have. He had an MVP. He did win a Gold Glove. Now, think about this in terms of his career stolen bases. A player could play for 28 years, have 50 steals every season, and still not catch Henderson. I mean, think about how astounding a stat that is.
But some of these seem like silly stats.
Right. And part of Ricky Henderson, too, was his personality. Yeah. Now, he was the complete opposite of Barry Bonds. He was pretty jovial and almost oblivious, but not nasty oblivious. He was just sort of marching to his own drummer. One of my favorite stories is he always hung out with the rookies. The Yellows hung out with the young guys on the team, and they were going to a spring training game, and he got on the bus, and he sat in the front of the bus with the rookies. Now, what was supposed to happen, and still does probably, is the major league players get their choice of seats. So they all get to sit in the back or the front, wherever the great seat on the bus is. And so he sat in front with the rookies, and he was chatting up, and one of the coaches says, "Ricky, you don't have to sit up here with the rookies. You have tenure." And Ricky just looks right at him and says, "Ricky don't have tenure. Ricky have 18 year." And they just shut him down, and they said, "Okay, Ricky, you sit with the rookies."
Here's my favorite fun fact about him. He's named after Ricky Nelson.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Isn't that interesting?
And he's also a Christmas baby, too. One
right.
of the few Christmas babies you'll ever run
babies.
into. And he was such a showman. I think that was part of it, too. He was similar to Barry Bonds or Reggie Jackson back in the day. He was there to entertain. And I think that gets lost a lot of time, is that, folks, baseball is entertainment. Let's not try to make
entertainment business is what it is.
As much as it means to us, it's entertainment. And he was a master entertainer. And his personality was above and beyond the game. And at the time that he played, he was probably the top player that even baseball fans, people who weren't baseball fans, knew who Ricky Henderson was.
He batted right through left.
Yes.
Only 57 players have ever done that.
Yeah, isn't that unusual? Batting right in the throw
left.
And little bar trivia question. Actually, maybe I'll fire this one. Do you know what team he actually ended his career with? You could win a bar bet with this one. His last team was the Dodgers, believe it or not.
Really?
After the Red Sox.
After the Red Sox?
We had 1 year with the Dodgers after he left the Red Sox. So, but he was with at least 10 teams. And I think he was with Oakland 3 or 4 different times.
That's the team he's most well known for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then he had a few years with the Yankees.
And who can forget the snap catch that he used to do like this? You just catch the ball and snap and flip it up.
And when he broke the record, he pulled up third base. I'm the greatest of all time.
Greatest of all time. So Ricky Henderson is our number 2, and as I said, you could probably make an argument that he'd be the number 2 player overall in this whole thing that we're doing. Yeah. He just happened to play the same position Bonds did.
So we'll do the next 3, maybe carry on a little less on the next 3, because those 2 guys deserve
1 and 2 by a mile.
Star billing. Number 3, have to go Carl Yastrzemski. Carl Yastrzemski. Carl Yastrzemski actually is, I think, a product of longevity.
Yes. He was a compiler. Yes.
He had one phenomenal season. And other than that, there's no real iconic moment of his.
No.
He made the last out in the 1978 playoff game, which was an iconic negative.
Yes.
But the 67 season that he had, which brought baseball back to Boston, and actually revitalized baseball, period.
Sure.
Bringing that back was an absolutely amazing year.
Yeah, it was one of the great years in baseball history. Yeah. He absolutely carried the team down the stretch and had a great World Series.
And the problem was he was the successor to Ted Williams, arguably the greatest hitter of all time. So here's the guy that's going to replace Ted Williams. You don't replace Ted Williams.
No.
And he struggled a little bit. His first 6 years were, maybe...
It was sort of Benintendi type years.
Yeah.
They were sort of league average players.
67 was a great pennant race because 4 different teams came down to the wire. And in the last 2 games of the season against the Twins, he went 7 for 8.
7 for 8.
Single-handedly beat the Twins and put the Red Sox into the World Series for the first time since 1918.
Yeah. And he also, don't get us wrong. He was a little bit of a compiler, but he did have 13 seasons where he got MVP votes. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That goes to show how consistent he was. He did win the MVP in 67. He had over 3,400 hits. That's a lot of hits when you think about it. Yeah. He also had 168 steals, so he did occasionally put in a steal, and he had 452 homers.
He's second all-time in games played to Hank Aaron. The only one. 3 quick facts about him. He won the Triple Crown in 67. He was the last one to win it until Cabrera won it in 2012.
Yep, he was the first one in over 40 years. He was the only one.
In 1968, he led the league in batting with .301 average, only 300 hitter in the league, which resulted in a major change. They lowered the mound from 15 inches to 10 inches.
Yep.
It was the year of Bob Gibson, and there was so little offense in the game that they actually changed the field because of what the situation was.
That was the Denny McClain year, the last guy who won 30 games was over 50 years ago.
It ain't like that no more.
No, it's not. No, not at all. But he did it. Oh, yeah, number 30.
And the last thing is, his grandson is now playing for the Giants and doing fairly well. He went 4 for 6 the other night.
Yeah, he had 6 homers up with the Giants
Mike
right
Yastrzemski,
now.
carrying on the family tradition. There's so many. It's interesting how many families manage to have their sons, grandsons even, make it to the major leagues.
And as we get older, we remember the fathers and grandfathers, which is really scary. You know, we saw Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the home run derby. I saw his dad in the home run derby. Wait a minute. Oh, okay. But Yaz played in 18 All-Star games, which is really incredible. And somewhat may have been a product that the Sox weren't very good during some of his tenure.
And 4 of those years, there were 2 All-Star games.
Yes, that's true. But he did have 650 doubles, which is a lot of doubles, too. But he just has a special place in Red Sox lore. Like you said, he was the face of the franchise from '67 all the way, pretty much until he retired. I mean, all through the '70s, Carl Yastrzemski was the Red Sox. And we know that he DH'd and played first a little at the end of his career, but he was still primarily a left fielder. And no, he still makes appearances at the ballpark. He still pops in the booth once in a while, and he still talks to Jerry Remy because they were briefly teammates for a couple of years.
He says hi.
He does. He says hi, just like Alden Fifth does.
Okay, number 4. Number 4 is Lou Brock. Played for the Cubs and Cardinals. Lou Brock also had 3,000 hits, 900 steals. He broke the record for steals before it got obliterated.
Before Henderson passed him.
The one thing about Lou Brock I don't quite understand, no gold gloves.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Maybe there were some good center fielders, left fielders when he played.
But he led the league in steals 8 times.
8 out of 9 seasons he led in stolen bases. And he also, like we were just talking about the pitcher's mound, he did a lot of this in the pitcher's era, too.
Right.
He did this a lot of this in the mid to late 60s when it was a pitcher's game. So think about what he might have done in an offensive era.
Now,
he still managed 3,000.
Except they wouldn't let him steal.
Yeah, right. But he played the first half of his career in the ultimate pitcher's era of all time in baseball. So you have to throw that in there. He had 10 seasons with an MVP vote. So it goes to show again how valuable he was in the team. He walked his fair share. He wasn't quite Bonds-like, but he certainly got on base. But one of the really interesting things about Lou Brock is we've talked many times on this show about how trades don't work out sometimes. Lou Brock is the middle of one of the all-time lopsided trades in baseball history. This is 1965. You may not know this. Lou Brock actually started with the Cubs for the first 3 or 4 years of his career before he became a longtime Cardinal. And in the 1965 season, for some insane reason, the Cubs traded him to the Cardinals for a pitcher named Ernie Broglio. Or Broglio, however you say it. Now, Broglio had a couple good years with the Cardinals. He was sort of a Porcello type, like a league average pitcher. But he had what they called then a sore arm. In other words, they burned him out because he threw so many innings. Now, the Cubs traded for him. He won a grand total of 7 games in the 3 years he was with the Cubs, and most of it was from the bullpen because he was so bad as a starter. And meanwhile, Lou Brock went on to have a Hall of Fame career with the Cardinals, and to this day, if you mention Ernie Broglio to Cubs fans, they grumble. And it's over 50 years after this trade happened.
Oh, it's like Jeff Bagwell.
Exactly. Sometimes trades work out, sometimes they don't. This is one that clearly did not work out for the Cubs.
So our 5th left fielder we picked is Tim Raines, just recently elected to the Hall of Fame, nicknamed Rock. I found some interesting facts about him. He got 100 college offers to play football. He was built like a football player.
He was.
His nickname was Rock. Rock Raines.
And if you watch this show from our first season, you know I was a huge advocate for him as a Hall of Famer, and he finally got in last year. Well-deserved. He is probably the second best leadoff hitter of all time. He had the misfortune of playing at the exact same time that the best leadoff hitter ever, Ricky Henderson, played. Their careers were almost exactly the same years. So he sort of overlooked, and his best years were with the Expos, who never got a lot of publicity. And later on in his career, he bounced around. People forget he was with that really good Yankees team in 1998, maybe the best team of our lifetimes, or at least the last 50 years.
Till last year.
Till last year with the Red Sox. But I think he never quite got the publicity because his main team was one that never really was a big media outlet. And so he sort of gets overlooked for that. But he played almost 2,000 games. He had 2,600 hits. 808 steals.
That's right.
Now, we're talking about all these left fielders, and you think of left field as a power position?
right.
Listen to all these stolen base numbers that these left fielders have. He also had 980 ribbies. He had 170 homers. He never won a Gold Glove, surprisingly, but he made 7 All-Stars. He won a Rookie of the Year. He was a batting champion one year.
Right.
And again, like all these other players, he hung around a long time. He was a bit of a compiler, not to the extent Yaz was, but he was always just like Rickey Henderson. He was just a pest. He was a terrific leadoff hitter, and he was always messing with the pitcher. And he was a Hall of Famer from day one, in my opinion.
He was involved in what was essentially a scandal. In 1986, he became a free agent, and along with all the other free agents like Rich Gedman, never received any offers. And there was no way to prove at the time there was collusion, but they finally did, and he actually received damages for the fact that no one signed him for a higher salary, and that collusion has been suspected many, many times.
Yeah, and I think more than any other player.
Like this past year.
Right, yes.
Why didn't anyone sign Kimbrel?
Kimbrel or Keuchel, or Adam Jones. I mean, it's the same thing. And I think more than any other player, he suffered because of that, because he was the absolute peak of his career in those years, and he lost, not a lot of time, but enough time to make his numbers slip a little bit, that he was further back in Hall of Fame consideration.
We're going to move this along. Name me some other left fielders that we consider.
Oh, this is amazing. This is how deep this position is. Now, we had to leave off Jim Rice, Manny Ramirez, Todd Helton, Lance Berkman, and current player Ryan Braun. I mean, these are people who didn't make the list.
Andre Dawson had
Andre
8
Dawson.
Gold Gloves. Kurt Flood had 7 Gold Gloves.
Yeah. So any other position, these guys would have been in the top 5. Kurt Flood, that's a great one, 7 Gold Gloves. And that goes to show how deep this position was and how hard it was to cut it down to just 5. Can you imagine Jim Rice not making the best left fielders of all time list?
You stat freaks, listen to these 2 stats. This is extraordinary. Those 5 guys, lifetime, had 3,796 steals, 1,830 home runs. Between them, they averaged 800 steals and 400 home runs.
That's insane.
which few other people have done ever by themselves.
And they averaged it.
And they averaged that, those 5 guys.
So
I think they're a worthy group to make Mount Rushmore.
I think so.
And it's going to be pretty tough to crack that.
Yeah, I don't foresee anyone coming into that left field list anytime soon. So I think that more than any position, because we haven't done center and right field, but I have a hunch that will be the best position that we have anywhere on the field. Because the left field, for some reason, is always just a really strong position. I mean, think about even the lesser tier guys that the Red Sox have had, like Mike Greenwell was a really solid player. Or, now Benintendi's a solid player, but it's for some reason just a position that is an embarrassment of riches, let's say.
So that's our group.
That's our group for today.
Now, as we've talked about before, Jason is the administrator for Red Sox Nation online, and one of the common gripes and complaints, Fenway costs too much money. I can't take my family there because it costs $1,000 for tickets, $2,000 for hot dogs, and $3,000 for ushers to kick us out of the park. Just complaining about the cost of baseball.
Right.
Well, for one thing, I don't think you should take children to Fenway Park. They have no idea about the game itself at that point. I've seen people bringing in toddlers and 2-year-olds who are going to be annoying, and they're not going to appreciate the game. And because Fenway is now sellout, you can't move around. This is interesting. When Jason was a boy, we went to a game once and sat in Section 1. At the end of the first inning, we moved to Section 3. And every half inning, we would move to a different seat. So by the time the game was over, we had sat all the way around the park.
You couldn't get to the bleachers then. They weren't connected.
We sat all the way around the park because there were a lot of empty seats.
And that was the night we ran into the ladies of the evening, too, which we talked about earlier.
So that was an activity to do besides just watching the game.
Oh, sure.
Just different vantage points. You can't do that any longer. There are no empty seats.
No, and ushers are there to kick you out of the front sections because that's where the rich people sit.
So here's our recommendation that people, I wish you would take this pretty seriously. Go to minor league baseball.
Absolutely.
There are 3 parks, 2 quite close, to take kids to. The first one I'd like to talk about is the Portland Sea Dogs up in Portland, Maine, where the field is a replica of the Green Monster in Fenway Park. Advanced ticket sales, $9 to $11. Children under 16 get a discount. Seniors over 62 get a discount. $6 general admission. And the thing I liked about it best is very often major leaguers are playing for rehab.
Absolutely.
Debbie and I went, if the pictures are up now, we can't see them, but if the pictures are up now, we saw Ryan Hannigan rehabbing, who was the Red Sox catcher in 2015. There's always promotions at these parks. The food is cheaper, and there's no parking problems. Every complaint you have about Major League Baseball is not a problem in minor league baseball.
In particular to Portland is Double A is where they stash a lot of the really big prospects. You know, Pawtucket is sort of a way station. Triple A is sort of the guys who are the fringe players that get called up a couple times a year. The real big future stars are usually at Double A, and that's a great opportunity.
Single and Double A, they try not to have many players over 25.
Right, exactly.
Unless they're back for rehab for some reason. Because this is a developmental section. Pawtucket is different.
Yes,
because
far different.
that's the shuttle players, we call it, the back and forth. The players go back and forth 3 or 4 times a year. So there are older players to play there for rehab.
Sure. The Marco Hernandezes of the world or the Josh Taylors of the world, that's who plays at Pawtucket. And there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong. You'll still see some future stars at AAA, but often the big stars will play very little, if not at all, at AAA. They'll come right from AA to the majors.
The best ones to see, though, I think are Lowell, because Lowell is half an hour drive away from here.
Well, I live in Drayton. It's a 5-minute drive for me. And it's really terrific because it is so family-oriented. There's a playground out in left field. They have promotions almost every night. Like they were giving away Jackie Bradley bobbleheads the other night. We were thinking of going, but it was 100 degrees on Sunday, so we didn't go. And it's a great place to bring kids who aren't ready for Fenway. My son is 6. He is not going to make it through an entire game at Fenway, let alone the train ride in or the drive-in, all the pre- and post-game stuff. Just the game itself, he's not going to make it through the game. So we bring him to the Spinners game, and he's good for about 6 or 7 innings. We bring him to the playground for an inning, and if you go home early, it's not a big deal. The day of the game, the best seats are $13, and that's day of game. If it's before that day, it's $11. So you can bring a family for $50 for 4 tickets, and you can sit in the second row, and you might catch a future star. There's a star right now in Lowell called Gilberto Jimenez, who I've seen him play. He looks like the real deal. He looks like a 5-tool guy. And, there might be one guy on the team that makes the majors out of everyone, but still, it's one guy that you saw when he was first starting out. In fact, at LeLacheur Park, they have a big thing on the wall behind the broadcaster's booth of all the major leaguers that played at Lowell. So Bradley, Benintendi, Betts, Barnes, Vasquez, a lot of the current Sox players actually started in Lowell way back when. And it's just a great experience. It's cheaper, it's more family friendly, and you won't think that you're wasting your money if you have to leave early for some reason, which we've seen at Fenway many times. How many times do families bring a couple kids in and they're yay for the first inning or 2, and then by the 5th inning they're either sleeping or bored or fidgety or they want candy or they want to go home.
How many times we've seen a harried father carrying his kids and his bedraggled wife out of about the 6th inning, having spent $300 to see the game.
Right. So. And I mean, I was 8 when I first legitimately went to a game, and I was explained step by step of what was going on in the game. And I think any younger than that, it's sort of an issue. The kids, and this is not a knock on anyone's kid at all. I just don't think kids have the attention span to sit through a 3-hour game like that, especially at Fenway, where most likely you're sitting in East Bum somewhere, rather than at Lowell when you're sitting in the second row. So, we highly recommend it. It's really something special.
Yeah. Especially the business about parking is a big deal, because parking in Fenway is nigh on impossible. And if you've not taken babies or young kids on the subways.
Oh my Lord! The trolley cars are bad enough for adults.
I certainly wouldn't recommend
kids
it.
On there.
And There's also lots of promotions, almost every day.
Every game there's some
Giving
promotion.
away
Yep.
bobbleheads or giving away special deals.
Oh, and what you'll see in the pictures, there was one game I attended that Bernie Carbo was there, but World Series hero of 1975. And he was there. He just came out with a book. He was signing it for us, and he was a great guy. He was sort of what you'd expect. He was a little bit of he probably did a little wacky tobacco back in the day, and the synapses aren't quite connecting like they used to. But he was very cordial and happy to be there. He got to throw out the first pitch, and it's a blast to bring the whole crew. You won't feel obligated to stay the whole game. If the kids get bored, so what? You're not spending $1 million.
Now, folks, you probably have been finally aware, but Pawtucket is leaving Pawtucket after next season and moving to Worcester and into Polar Park, sponsored by the Polar Soft Drink Company.
And it's a perfect location for this park.
And this place it's a $90 million stadium, 10,000 seats. And what they are doing is renovating the entire Kelly Square area, like what they call the Canal District. They're revitalizing it, with a huge hotel is going to be built near there, and it's a $240 million downtown renovation. A lot of times when major league parks come in, like Baltimore.
Baltimore's a perfect example.
They build up the neighborhood, so all of a sudden now what was a rundown neighborhood is now a gem in the city.
Oh, yeah, but Camden was built in the blown-out factory part of Baltimore that was where the druggies hung out, and it was just the place in Baltimore you didn't want to go. So they said, let's take the park, put it right in the worst part of the city, and it'll revitalize it. And it did. And hopefully that will happen in Worcester, because that Kelly Square area sure could use some
And and Worcester's gotten a bad rap. When they first put the Centrum in, they had a hockey team playing there, and they had a lot of concerts, and NCAA basketball played there once. Well, they plan to have 20 concerts a year at Polar Park. Football and hockey, just like they do in Fenway, and it's just a shot down $190 to go to the game.
It's great, yeah.
And I said, ticket prices tops $15, lower $5. So parking, everything to see what amounts to semi-made. That team will probably be as good as Baltimore.
I'm sure. Yeah, right. They won't have Andrew Kasher that we can trade for, but sure. Yeah, and it's a short, and like we said, it doesn't involve going to Fenway. The game itself is an experience, but getting in and out of Boston is just such a slog. It takes the whole day to get in and out of Boston. In Worcester, you just drive down the highway, you park, bang, you're done. You're done.
We go to 5 or 6 night games a year. The games these days have been running 3.5 to 4 hours, pretty much regularly. Game gets out at 11. We usually don't drive all the way in because it's a hassle. So to get the subway back to Alewife, it's after midnight. By the time we drive home, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
And so it's an ordeal. The game itself is great, but getting there and, as Sam Johnson said, seeing it is great, going to see it is not great.
Going to see it is not great. And I usually drive right in. I'll suck up the $50 and pay for the parking lot across the street.
Thing, yeah.
But same thing, though. It's so crowded to get out of there, and Fenway isn't near a highway or even a main road or anything like that. So it's all these streets that are clogged, and in the way in, you're going in rush hour traffic, of course, too. So just getting in and out of there, it's as long as the game, actually getting in and out of the city before and after. So we highly recommend the minor league parks.
What we're trying to address is the people that complain they can't take their family to a ball game. Baseball is baseball, and the baseball you see there is great.
It is.
A tip for any people with young, say, 6 or 7-year-old kids. Jason, of course, went to games when he was a toddler. Lugged him along. One night, just he and I went. I want to say maybe he was 7. I brought along a scorebook and taught him how to score. Baseball is very mathematic.
Oh, sure.
And you learn the positions each player, how to score. You follow it. Within a week, he understood the game like that, and within a couple weeks, he was teaching ladies of the night to score.
A different kind of score, mind you.
But it's a good thing to do. Teach kids the proper way to score. Buy them a scorebook.
Absolutely.
They used to sell scorecards at Fenway for 15 cents. Now,
I think it's $2 or $3, and
sometimes
you
more
get
than
you get the little mini golf pencil with it, and that's it. So I think we're being told to wrap it up right now.
Well, not quite, but we're going to the trivia question.
Oh yes, that's right.
Okay. All right. So the question was, for you folks back home again, Roger Clemens, this year, what was the guy's name that won the MVP this year?
Oh, it was not Justin, Shane Bieber.
Shane Bieber, the Cleveland 5th inning pitcher in the game. Roger Clemens won in '86. when he pitched the first 2 innings. Pedro struck out 5 out of 6 in 1999. Who was the last Red Sox to win the MVP?
I think it was J.D. Drew. Yay!
Correct.
Who was not one of our favorite players when he was here.
J.D. Drew.
J.D. Drew. I think it was 2008, wasn't
2008.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
He hit a 2-run homer to tie the game in the 7th, and the game went 15
I remember it. I remember
but they
it.
gave him the title. That and the home run he hit in the playoffs.
That's right.
His 2 iconic. J.D. Drew was like the least emotional player who ever played.
Oh my God!
If he hit a home run or struck out, you couldn't tell the difference looking at him.
He made the dude Lebowski look like Lou Piniella. I mean, he was the most flat, expressionless guy you could ever know about. All right, so
we started to do something at the end of last program, didn't quite get to it. The phenomenon of the bobblehead.
The bobbleheads.
We have our own Abe Lincoln bobblehead.
Our own Abe Lincoln bobblehead.
Imagine people sitting around Madison now. We can do something to promote baseball. Let's take a figurine that doesn't look anything whatever like the player, stick his head on a spring, have a little advertising thing in front for Coke or whoever sponsored it, and give it away at the ballparks.
There we go.
Well, it has become an epidemic.
Every
Tuesday night at Fenway now, they give away a bobblehead. And people stand outside buying them back.
Yes, they do.
For $10 and then selling them on eBay. I missed the one this week. This week was a Mookie bobblehead hitting the Grand Slam last year. And when he did, Eckersley said,
"It's time to party."
It's not there, Joe. It's not there. That's an extra.
It's time to party.
So you push a button and it says time to party. But anyway, these are some bobbleheads we just like to show you if you haven't seen them all.
Yeah.
So we just start from the top of the ones you have and we'll go down through them.
So this was Ivan Rodriguez.
This was Ivan. A little story behind this. Deb and I went to see the Tigers, and they were giving away IROD bobbleheads, Ivan Rodriguez bobbleheads. We got to the park in Detroit at the time, and now. We're Drawingville. We got to the park, and there was a mob outside. Oh, my God, what a crowd this is going to be. Outside the gates, they were giving the bobbleheads away. People were taking them and going home. They didn't go to the ball game.
Forget the game. We just want the
bobblehead.
bobblehead.
We could finally get inside, maybe half full.
Yeah.
They just wanted the bobblehead to take home.
But they sell for triple, quadruple the price on eBay or whatever, what have you. So people look at it as a profit deal.
As a collectible now. Yeah. Like Beanie Babies. You know?
Sure, yeah, right.
What's the next one we got?
Let's see.
Wally!
Yes, Wally with the championship trophy.
After the champions, they put out several Red Sox bobbleheads holding the trophy, so we had to get Wally.
There's Wally.
Not everybody knows this, but Wally hasn't always been the most popular fellow.
No,
when they first introduced him, Deb and I were at the ball game. He came out of the wall. He's Wall E, get it?
Yeah.
And when he came out of the wall, everybody booed.
Yep.
We did not want a stupid mascot like some of the places.
And you have to credit the person who really brought Wally, made him popular, was Jerry Remy.
Jerry Remy.
From the day one, he made a big deal. He had the little Wally in the booth with him that sat in the chair every game, and he and Sean McDonough told stories about Wally acting up during the game and everything, and he made Wally cool.
That's right.
So thank you, Jerry. Wally
has
Jerry to thank for that.
And here's some of the other ones coming up here. This is Chris Sale.
Chris Sale?
Looks a lot like him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a great resemblance.
He is lefty, at least. They got that
they got that part right.
This is Mookie stretching to make a catch.
Oh, that's Jackie. Jackie Bradley Jr.
That's right, Jackie.
That's Jackie making a catch.
Jackie making a great catch. It does somewhat resemble him.
It has a beard, so I mean that's a start.
The hat, though, doesn't fit. It's
one of those big cowboy hats.
It's got on. And the little advertising red thing down at the bottom, advertising,
well,
Halifax Long John.
Because it is a business, after all.
Right.
You're supposed to make money on these. Pedro!
Pedro was acting up in the dugout one day, so Nomar and a couple of guys taped him, I think Pedroia too?
I don't remember who it was,
They
but
taped
it was Nomar.
him to a post. And so that was such an iconic taping that they put it out as a bobblehead.
And you can see footage of him. He's taped up and smiling against the pole in the dugout.
Mookie. Mookie is also known as a great bowler. He's bowled 300 games, so they put out a bobblehead of Mookie bowling. They want to take advantage of Mookie as much as they can, promote him.
Not really relevant to baseball, but
Mookie bowling.
Cool. Mookie bowling.
This is
here we go.
These were 3 different giveaways.
Yeah.
They called the Splash. You know, there's the silly thing the ball players do when you have a walk-off hit. They come up behind you with Gatorade and throw it all over you while you're being interviewed.
Or the interviewer sometimes,
so,
too.
Here we have the three outfielders used to dance a lot. Mookie being splashed by Benintendi and Jackie Bradley. And so you put them together as a trio. The trio goes for about a $130 on eBay.
But it's a package deal. There's J.D. Martinez.
Looking up for a pop-up. No, I guess it was a home run.
I guess it's going to pop up, but we won't go there. And who's that? Oh, here we go.
This goes back to the famous playoff game where the manager didn't pull Pedro in time, and the Yankees tied the game up, and then they lost 2000.
Oh, we've talked. That's Grady Little from 2003.
So instead of a bobblehead, they have a bobble arm.
A bobble arm.
His arm bobbles because he should have pulled the pitcher out. It's actually a signed copy. That's the signed
nowadays,
copy.
now that they've won 4 World Series, we can have a sense of humor about it. But if you did that in 2003, you would have been run out of town.
Yeah, they didn't.
Here we go.
Here's Orsillo and Remy put out as a bobblehead duo in the Nesson booth. That's a tough one to find. That's
a popular one.
I won't tell you where I keep that one.
Here we go.
Tom Caron.
Illustrious pre- and post-game host.
This was not a Major League giveaway. This was a Portland Sea Dogs giveaway.
TC with the highest voice of any announcer.
And the highest hairline, which he's very upset about.
So this is the last one here.
This is when worlds collide here. This is Benintendi also being in Star Wars. So,
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
so Game of Thrones fans, baseball fans have a bobblehead that meets both factors.
Being the entrepreneur businessman that I am, I came up with a couple other ideas of how you could get bobble things, making money. So, real quick, we'll just wrap this up with 2 great ideas. You may remember back in the 03-04 run of the great years, I think he was with the team from 03 to 09. The Sox had a reliever named Mike Timlin. He was a very underappreciated guy, terrific 7th, 8th inning setup guy. And not to be too gross here, but my wife and I call him Snots. Because there was one game, it was a freezing cold night at Fenway, and as he was coming off the mound after finishing an inning, the Nesson cameras zoomed right in on him, and he did the old farmer's handkerchief right on camera, one of these, and it went all the way down here. And he just took it like this and just wiped it, just winged it off and the camera quickly cut away after they realized what he was doing. But from that day on, my wife and I called him Snots. We still do, in honor of the Rottweiler in Vacation.
So Lunenburg children at class, Daddy, what's Snots
Daddy, what's Snots mean? So now, my suggestion is a bobblehead Snots. Maybe have the head and the little thing hanging down here that wiggles too, along with the head. I think that'd be a great moneymaker. That'd be a collector's item. Another one, everybody knows Steve Lyons from the Nesson booth days. Right. Now, Steve Lyons back in the day was he was a better-looking gentleman, in better shape than he is now. And when he played center field, he used to wiggle his buns for the audience out in center field. So how about a bobble butt for Steve Lyons? You turn it around and the bum wiggles, and everybody cheers.
He also dropped his pants at first base once.
Yes, that'd be a good one too.
Bobble
the
pants
can come down.
That's right.
That's a great. So just a couple other ideas. If you have any other bobble ideas, let us know, because we're always looking to make money on this show.
It's been a long show. We're getting a little tired.
Yes.
Okay.
After 5.5 seasons.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, but there's something interesting that happened. We have another cell of followers out in Encino, California, and a fellow named Carl Samrock sent us "Take Me Out to a Ball Game" sung in Yiddish. So we're going to say goodbye, and the closing credits this time will be over. "Take Me Out to a Ball Game" sung in Yiddish by our good friend Carl Samrock. See you all anon.
Take care.
Nimm mich mit zu der Ballgame, zum Eulen lo mir Talkin. Kauf mir die Nislech und Cracker Jack, will ich kein Mal von dort nicht weg. Gibt's Mut, die Ballspieler, es passt nicht, als man versplitt. Wähl's es 1, 2, 3 Strikes und euch bei der Baseballspiel. Nimm mich mit zu der Ballgame, zum Eulen lo mir Talkin. Kauf mir die Nislech und Cracker Jack, will ich kein Morphen.
Thank you for watching another outstanding program provided to you by Lunenburg Public Access. We're here to serve the community. Lunenburg Public Access is always looking for volunteers to help record town events, high school sports, and town meetings. Please consider helping us out today. To contact us, you can call 617-763-3018 or email us at lunenburgaccess@gmail.com.